What's going on, everybody? Couch Co-op coming at you. This is our very first official video with what we're gonna probably title here 8-bit shower thoughts, just kind of general ideas, thoughts on video game topics, whatever just kind of comes through our heads, and kind of give you sort of some unadulterated thoughts on whatever topic we choose. Today's topic is good video games to start with. So, Kevin and I were talking, and we kind of both agree that it's hard sometimes to get into video games if you are unfamiliar with a lot of genres or if you don't have a lot of consoles. You sometimes you just don't know where to start, and hopefully this video kind of gives you that stepping stone. Or even if you are a gamer or you do play a lot of video games already, it might give you some ideas to branch off into different genres. So we're gonna list 7 genres throughout this and kind of give you our thoughts on this. Any more to add to this, Kev?
Yeah, it's 7 games. We've done this separately, so I don't know his games, he doesn't know mine. We probably constructed the lists differently. I didn't go for like beginner games in terms of what I like. If a 5-year-old asked me what's a good first-person shooter to get into, I'd be like, well, go play Bloons or something. I just kind of went about it generically. Like, if somebody of any age just said, hey, what game should I play, I kind of threw rating out the window. Like, I didn't care if it was M for mature.
Yeah, same.
These are just like games that like I think that are easy to get into. I attempted to stay away from multiplayer games just because the community as a whole plays a large factor into like the ease into the game or like the desire to continue to play the game.
Agreed.
So like I know one of our categories is shooters, and to the surprise of no one, I didn't put Counter-Strike there.
Yeah, and shooters can be kind of messy with the whole multiplayer aspect as well.
Yeah.
And I think what's actually worth mentioning, a lot of these games are probably going to fall under multiple categories. So the category we put them into isn't the end all be all. It's just kind of where we thought they would fit if that's what you're desiring out of gaming.
And honestly, in that same vein, it kind of helps because if it's a shooter game, like let's take, no, I'm not using examples. I don't want to steal from Ryan on accident. But if it's a shooter game that has RPG elements,
right,
if we classify it as an RPG, that actually could be a really good starter RPG game. It's
right,
like, hey, these are the beginnings of what like a full-blown RPG looks like. This just has like a good taste. So, just because it, you might think it's like, oh, well, that's just always a shooter. It's like, sure, but it has RPG elements, and it would be a good start for an RPG player or for someone to get into RPG gaming.
Yep, 100%. I'm going to rattle off the different topics that we have, and we got like one extra topic we'll get into towards the end.
So we'll do 6, and then we'll surprise with the last one.
6 and then a special bonus topic, but we'll rattle off the 6 so you kind of have an idea of what we're going to talk about. Maybe you just want to skip towards what you're interested in, but we're going to talk about
timestamps will be in the description
and just all the way down there. But we're going to be talking about shooters. That's going to be first. RPGs, roguelites and roguelites. They're kind of interchangeable, and we'll kind of touch on what they are in general, since sometimes that's just a confusing topic in its own right. Action adventure is another topic that we'll be covering. Turn-based and fighting games. So those are the big 6 games. Now, I've chosen 2 games per topic. One is kind of, and I believe Kevin has as well, so one is kind of like, hey, like if you're just really starting out, jump into this, or if you maybe want something a little bit more in-depth or advanced, you've already played games like this, we got another sort of extra step forward. That's what you're interested in. Shooters, Kev?
Yeah.
Do you want to take it first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I know I said I wouldn't do Counter-Strike, and I'm not, but my first shooter, if somebody asked me, hey, I'm looking to play a shooter, what should I get into? I went with Halo, specifically 5 or ODST. Again, I know the multiplayer aspect of that game, it's kind of hit or miss. I mean, at my experience with the Halo community has been fine. I've never played it like competitively or anything, so like my multiplayer experience has been fine with it, even like the Halo 2 and 3 days. But the big draw to a game like Halo is the single player.
Yes,
if somebody
absolutely
said, hey, what's a good shooter game? Like, go play the Halo campaign, play it on normal, and then go run through it again on veteran, or like
legendary.
Legendary. The increase there is a mythic, or something like that. Yeah. Like it played on the like subsequent difficulties to kind of get a grasp of, you don't even really have like some ADSing. It's not primary ADS games. The movement in the game is pretty basic. You don't have to, there's no bunny hopping, there's no crouch canceling, there's teabagging. That's about as advanced as that movement gets. outside of like the sprint and then the shield bash at a point. But yeah, other than that, like what I went for was easy mechanics to just learn, hard to master, right? Because like getting somebody to
definitely weird with how the shooting works in the game sometimes, depending on the weapon you have.
Yeah, and so it also covers a broad spectrum of weapons too. So you have like the fuel, you have rockets, you have shotguns, you have like you have a spray of weapons, including energy rifle, plasma rifle, plasma pistol, stuff like that. But they're easy to kind of just pick up and go, oh, this is what this weapon does.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And like if you want to master it, sure, and you want to learn how to like hit headshots, you want to with a BR or whatever, DMR, stuff like that, you can. But it's easy to start and be like, okay, I get what this game is going for.
Yeah, it is definitely a really good way to learn first-person shooter engagement, because oftentimes things like Call of Duty can just kind of come at you 100 miles per hour, and before you know it,
you
you're
just
dead,
die.
and you just die.
Yep.
Halo's a little bit longer in terms of that time to kill ratio, as well as what I like that you mentioned was the storyline. Halo is a storyline that personally, like, I've read books for. It's just good. It's just a good science fiction.
Read the comics.
I read the manga, dude. All right, it's just good science fiction.
It
so
is.
If you like,
world building's great in that game.
World building's great, and if you're just bored and you're like, wow, I don't like first-person shooters, but I want to kind of engage in some new sci-fi, just Wikipedia Halo, and you'll thank me later.
Yeah, it's super. I think there's a lot to that, and the other thing too, and I think part of it is if they did get into the multiplayer, if you do get into the multiplayer, it's really easy to just kind of queue into a game and get out of it.
Yep.
There's not this long queue process. There's not like a lot to it. It's just like I'm just hopping into the middle of a game, just shoot some people and get out. It's pretty mindless in that aspect. Obviously, again, hard to master in terms of like shot placement and stuff like that, positioning, like every game's got that, but just from a core mechanic, core mechanic, this game is really easy to get into. Okay, so my second game that I picked is kind of in the same vein, but it's Gears of War. Specifically, I picked Gears because, again, it has a really big story component. I will just not lie and say I cried in Gears 3. If you've played Gears 3, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody else. I definitely cried during Gears 3. Single manly tear, but it was there. But again, it's got a good story, great story. Love the story of like Gears 1 through 3.5, 4 kind of hit or miss. But it gets into more advanced movement. So it's a third-person shooter. You have to learn the mantling mechanics. You got to learn how to slide. You got to learn how to like dodge rolling's a mechanic. It also has the active reload. So you're kind of managing more things at once in Gears at any given time than you are in, say, a Halo or a Call of Duty. That's why I put it like one rung up. Like if you wanted to get into shooters and like a little bit more complex shooter, Gears of War is definitely up there, because then when you get into like really advanced Gears, you have to learn how to like slide cancel and wall bounce and wall hop, and your movement becomes just absolutely insane, on top of needing to hit shots, always hitting your active reloads and stuff like that. You have grenades.
So there's a lot more intimate mechanics with the shooting compared to
there is. Yep, exactly. And they have similar styles in terms of their multiplayer. You have like that kind of traditional, you all spawn with a certain weapon, whether that's a BR or in like Gears, you get the Lancer or the shotgun or both. And then you have ground loot that you got to go get. And so you're playing for like positioning around the ground loot. But at the same time, it's also just like, hey, just go chainsaw somebody. It's fun. Like, it's really fun to just like run up to somebody and just like stick a chainsaw and like rip them in half. Super satisfying.
Now, I've actually never played Gears of War. I'm not familiar with the series. I've played a few cover shooters, and I know the cover shooters that I've played, what's really important to also kind of keep in mind is enemy positioning. Whereas in like bullet storms, you kind of just focus on who's shooting at you, take them out and move on. But with cover shooters, you need to be kind of more cognizant of every single kind of piece on the board moving around you as well, in case of flames and stuff like that.
And what's kind of interesting about Gears is, in terms of cover shooting, it's actually, in my opinion, pretty poor at being a cover shooter.
Okay.
It's good insofar as it has that mechanic and can show you, but if you just pop up over an overhang and just try and do anything with that, your head's gonna get taken off by somebody with a sniper. So that's where you need to know where everybody is and where the weapon placements are. But like, honestly, it's really bad to just be sitting like behind cover.
Okay. So it's a little different than like a traditional.
Yeah, like I would say like Mass Effect would be like a better example of like a cover shooter where it's like, okay, Yeah, Division's a good one. Yeah, and Gears, if you sit behind cover, what you've done is you're like, hey, I know exactly where this guy is, so I'm gonna go kill him.
Got it. Okay.
So
okay.
you made yourself a statue.
Got.
But as a core mechanic, as a basic mechanic, it's there and it's really good, especially as you're working through the campaign and stuff like that.
Yep.
So that's where I put Gears one above. Also, the weapons in Gears are a little bit harder to use. I know I haven't played the most recent Gears, but like, you know, Torque Bow is harder probably to use in my opinion than any weapon in Halo. It's just like a normal bow. You charge it up and you fire it. However, you can also, if you're good, you can actually bounce the torque bow shot, so you can ricochet it off walls. You can also shoot it over cover if you again know how to like arc it properly. There's weapons like the digger. The sniper has to be a headshot or it doesn't kill. And so when you have fast mechanics, fast movement like Gears, or smoother movement, I should say,
Sure.
it becomes tougher. So like again, like everything in Gears is just like mechanically one step up. I'm sure there's a neckbeard that I'm pissing off right now.
We'll see it in the
Who's
comments.
like, oh, you've never played professional Halo. It's like, you're right, I haven't. But I can say, having played hundreds, if not thousands of hours in both games, like, I think Gears is mechanically tougher to play. Just because it takes more to do.
I've seen gameplay of Gears, and I would say that's correct, right?
So yeah, those are my two shooters. I don't know if you have any.
As for my two shooters, and I honestly, I feel like I'm gonna get some pushback on this, and that's all right. I knew I was gonna get pushback on this as I wrote them down. My first shooter that I think is actually quite good, and Kevin, please hold your comments till I'm done, is Overwatch. Yep, you see it on his face. Okay, so Kevin doesn't like Overwatch. That's neither here nor there right now. And if you're not familiar with it, Overwatch is a hero shooter. So whereas classically you have Halo, you got a bunch of different guns you fire. In Overwatch, you choose a specific character. They have a specific weapon that you then engage with. Now, like we kind of touched on, it is a multiplayer game, and that can be non-conducive to starting a video game for the first time because the environment can be kind of toxic depending on what you're getting into. If you turn off all chat, if you turn off the mic, and you just try to
if you disengage with the community entirely.
If you disengage with the community entirely and play Overwatch, I do believe it is a good game to start out with. The cast of characters they have are incredible. I mean, like, it's just a diverse, interesting group of characters to learn.
There's probably one for everybody.
And there's one for everyone, right? So there's a bunch of different heroes, so you might not vibe with Widowmaker, who is classically a sniper. She uses a sniper rifle. You go, I hate this. But you prefer Winston, who is a literal gorilla with an electric cannon. Daddy Winston. So, and his electric cannon auto aim. So there are options in the heroes that are provided where aiming isn't as critical. So it's, you're not, if you don't have the Twitch shooter reflexes, it can be good to kind of just get your feet wet into a shooter game. There is a community that can be kind of rough to get into sometimes. So, I mean, I recommend sticking with quick play, which is their casual play, which even then can be kind of sweaty. If you have a friend who plays the game, or if you can get a friend to get in with you, it makes things 100 times better.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
And it's very vibrant, it's very modern. Something that might come across with Halo is it may feel just a little outdated. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just the aspect of it being, you know, a 14-year-old game or whatever it is now.
And it does an ADS very well, and it's like nothing crazy. I mean, but although, let's be honest, everyone's just going to be a Tracer main.
Everyone's going to be a Tracer main.
She has the best skins, the most skins.
She gets all the love from Blizzard. It's, that's unfortunate. But the second game that I have listed, and this is kind of more directed at a crowd who is like, okay, you know what, I've played most of the Call of Duties or some of the Call of Duties. I'm familiar with ADS mechanics, or I'm familiar with, you know, fast bullet storm type video games. Titanfall 2.
I actually had Destiny was my second, or it was a game. If you went first and took like Gears, whatever, Destiny was my other one in the same vein.
Yep, and Titanfall 2, the shooting feels really tight and really good. It does have a solo campaign that is S tier. Like, the storyline in the campaign is incredible. I love it. I've played it like at least 3 or 4 times, so definitely recommend checking that out. It can be a little gruesome. The movement very fast. It is an incredibly fast-paced game. There's wall running. There's a lot of different like inertia mechanics. So there's grappling hooks. Everything's going off the wall. Getting used to that can be kind of a headache, but if you end up learning it semi-decently, it's a ton of fun.
I heard it's like, because I played Titanfall 1 a little bit. I never really played Titanfall 2. I heard it's actually pretty intuitive where you can wall run, where you can't wall run. And it's just kind of getting used to like really mastering the grapple. So you're not just like stand still, grapple up to a high wall. It's like actually using it to propel yourself forward.
Correct.
Is where the grapple kind of becomes a little bit more difficult to use.
So yeah, so what people typically, and what I experienced when I first played it, is that you have a tendency to just overshoot your mark. You're going so fast, or like you don't understand sort of the weight of your character that you just zip past where you're trying to go. So that can be, but once you understand the grappling mechanics, once you understand sort of your weight, it does become a little bit easier to manage, and it is pretty intuitive in that sense. So definitely love that game. Oh, and for what it's worth, there is no storyline in Titanfall 1, so I don't need anybody in the comments being, but what if I didn't see the first game? There's only one story. It's in Titanfall 2. Please shut up.
And worst case scenario, you just get to play Transformers at that point, right?
I guess that's the other aspect that I totally.
Yeah, you totally glossed over the fact that
you literally play as a Gundam. So if you wanted to be in a gigantic robot firing missiles, that is an option. That's kind of the other half of Titanfall, is you play in these giant mechs called Titans. Yeah, kind of forgot that was an aspect of the game. Not important. It just adds to it. I promise. It's incredibly fun. What Titan you use, there are different classes, different sort of abilities. You'll fall into one that you like. So definitely.
I agree with the Titanfall. Yeah, I Overwatch has never been for me. I wouldn't.
We've tried.
I mean,
I've tried playing Overwatch with Kevin.
It does offer a little bit for everybody. Like, I think you picked good games that like have a little bit of something for everyone, you know. I think that's it for shooters.
I think we're good for shooters. Nothing else to touch on, so we just move on to the next one.
Yeah, I'll kick it off, I guess, with RPGs. I kind of touched on this earlier. If it's a good game, but it has some RPG elements. So my pick is Borderlands. Specifically Borderlands 2. I know this, obviously, for story purposes, you'll want to play Borderlands 1. But Borderlands 2, I think, has a little bit better cast of characters, especially for NPCs. So like the story in Borderlands 2 is better. So it's like, that's part of what makes it fun as an RPG, is the story is really good. The characters are really likable. They're really fun to be around.
And for what it's worth, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but for what it's worth, I never played Borderlands 1, but playing Borderlands 2, I never felt lost in terms of the story.
Yeah, they do a good job of like recapping everything. You know, Handsome Jack's one of the best villains in gaming, in my opinion, and Tiny Tina is my favorite NPC of all time. And then on top of that, it has RPG elements. And what I mean by that is it has a leveling up system. So you're going to pick a character, you get one of 4, find one you like. They usually use like a subclass of weapons that they have one ability, typically. So you're never lost. It's primary first-person shooter with RPG elements in that. There's a leveling mechanic, only one ability that you really ever have to manage, and then there's like gear customization. So you get to pick up different weapons, different mods, different grenade mods, and so you get to customize your character kind of like that, build a character that way. But really, these RPG elements are really minimalistic as opposed to the second game that I have listed. But it's super easy to get into because it is just an FPS at its core. You are just left clicking on heads.
It's like an FPS with an RPG built into it.
Yeah. And the story is so interesting. It'll just keep you going forward. You'll just keep playing just because you'll want to figure out what happens at point X. So I think if you really wanted to get into RPGs, just like at a very basic level, I think Borderlands is just way too fun, way too easy to just kind of like get your feet wet with it.
Yeah.
They're really fun. The DLC for Borderlands 2, if you get that, is excellent. It's absolutely fantastic. So I can't recommend that game enough. And the second game I have, probably to like 0% surprise, is The Witcher, specifically Witcher 3. It's
that was also my second game. We'll touch on that later, but yeah.
Okay. specifically Witcher 3. Once you've kind of dipped your feet into a game like Borderlands and you want a more difficult mechanically and just more, I guess, not really immersive, but more, it's more of a little bit more of a sandbox, is The Witcher, because there is more customization with it. You know, you don't get slot. So when you in Borderlands, you kind of pick a class and then you build your character around that class. Well, when you start in The Witcher, you're just kind of given a blank slate. It's like, okay, how do you want to build Geralt?
Yes.
Do you want to go an alchemy build? Do you want to go a science build? Do you want to just go nothing but
and
like
actually,
weapons?
to tangent off that real quick, for people that might be unfamiliar with RPGs, it might sound similar to choose a class and build to having a blank slate and building from there. Those sound similar on paper, but they really aren't. Because when you have a class that you can build down, you're locked into certain abilities or certain paths that lean into itself. When you have a blank slate, all of a sudden you can go everywhere, but if you end up doing so, nothing happens, kind of. So they are functionally different.
They are different. There's just more possibilities when you start with a blank slate.
Correct.
Not to mention, there's a crafting mechanic that is a little, it can get a little overwhelming because you can pick up basically everything in the game as a crafting material. But once you kind of get the grasp of it, it's actually pretty easy. On top of that, again, there's a leveling system that's super interesting. And then the big part of why I chose The Witcher as the second game, specifically 3, is A, the story is really good. Again, big story component. And then B, there's actually dialogue options. So now you can get into kind of an ethics and a morality system of, okay, well, how do you want to play Geralt? Do you want to kind of play him just kind of a dick and he's just like gonna kill it? He's just gonna go murder everybody and get his money? Or is he gonna be kind of like a lawful villain and he's gonna go do what he needs to do, but it's gonna be at the benefit of somebody else, but they don't like the way he went about it.
Or you could play like classic mercenary where you just stay right in the middle. You're just, hey man, I'm just looking to get paid.
But exactly. So, and then your dialogue and your actions have consequences, which again gets into the story and the world building and like kind of keeping, like, moving the game forward. These are more classic RPG elements that a game like Borderlands doesn't have. It just sticks with character creation, classes, weapons, and that's pretty much it. Like, there's not really anything else to it.
Scheming, building, stuff like that.
And the combat in The Witcher is a little bit tougher to get a hold of as well.
It is a little funky at first.
It's definitely a little wonky. Yeah.
Recommend playing on a controller if you have the ability. If you have a PC that you're like, oh, I've downloaded The Witcher, try to play with the controller if possible. Yeah, it'll make things a little easier.
So yeah, those are mine too. You know, feel free to agree or disagree.
Yeah, no, I think those are good two Borderlands, especially. I think is a really good pick for people who, you know, have shooter experience and want to kind of dive into, like, one of the most intimidating things about RPGs, in my opinion, can be gear or theory crafting. And Borderlands, I think, does a good job of taking that anxiety out of it. Right? You know you're going to do damage. You know your build is going to be efficient regardless of what it is. And you don't need to, you know, have a Google spreadsheet out figuring out the absolute best strength stat that you need in order to make one ability usable. So in that sense, it's definitely a great starter. And as for The Witcher, I'm just going to kind of dive into my thoughts on The Witcher because that was my second game. Like Kevin had already said, it is a really interesting story. That's going to be the driving force behind it. If you're new to RPGs, it can be overwhelming. Sometimes with RPGs, like classic RPGs, there's a lot of mechanics they throw at you all at once, and all of a sudden you don't know what you want to do with yourself. So, and that kind of also leads back into the blank slate things. If you're starting it for the first time, just pick a tree, move along with it, and then once you're a little more comfortable with what you find yourself doing, find where you can branch that supplements the decisions you've already made, and you'll find a little bit more success in that route, because oftentimes people might make the mistake of starting a route or starting a decision-making process halfway through going, oh, but I like the sound of this instead, but it's too late. So just kind of just own the horse that you bought and kind of ride it. But
what was your first game?
My first game that I was going to be, and it's kind of a duel. So my first game is Fallout 3. That's kind of like an asterisk. Fallout 3 is a very old game. It was made in like 2007 or 2008. And and sometimes it can be hard to pick up old games if you don't have the nostalgia for them. So a little asterisk there would be Fallout 4, which I don't think is as good, but it definitely is a little more accessible for somebody who has never played a Fallout game.
And if they have a propensity for freeing villagers.
For freeing villagers, that's basically all you're doing. But anyway, Fallout 3 specifically, it gives you the classic RPG feel that, like, your decisions matter. Spoiler alert, sort of. I mean, it's been 16 years, but one of the first decisions you get to make in the game is whether or not you want to just blow up the first town you go to. Right?
Yeah.
So the brief synopsis, you're in post-apocalyptic America. You just came out of what's called the Vault, and that vault had this group of survivors that were there for like 100 years, and you decide to leave one day. Actually, to find your dad. I think it's like Finding Nemo, but reversed.
And Fallout 4
Fallout 4 is actually Finding Nemo. Anyhow, so you leave to go find your dad, and like you're going through a wasteland, and you find this town of survivors, and you're in this town of survivors that's made their community around an unexploded atomic bomb. They actually worship this thing. And there's one dude in the town who's like, yo, I will give you a lot of money if you just blow that bomb up. Because like it was in front of a railroad or something. I don't know. Usual corporate stuff. And anyway, you can say yes or no, and your storyline drastically changes on that one decision alone, and that's not even the only point that branches. So Fallout 3 is a really good example of, you know, your decisions matter. And the leveling mechanic, I think, is a little bit easier, right? You technically have a blank slate, but all that happens really is you choose a list of stats you want to invest into, which and it kind of lays it out real simply what they do for you, and then you just get perks as you keep going that just invest in sort of your character's ability. So these perks aren't necessarily game changing, but you can read them and be like, oh yeah, I'll take that one, and there's not so much.
And it just helps, and you can kind of like, as you go through the game, go like, oh man, my radiation resistance is awful. So you can kind of either lead into that and, you know, do that tree, or you can get more radiation resistance.
Right. There's not so much buyer's remorse, I guess, when you pick perks in Fallout 3. So that's what I really like it. And the storyline is actually fairly good. So
it is really fun. And I highly recommend that nobody go into luck for your first build. Second time around, do it because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's actually a little asterisk there. Whenever you play an RPG and there's a luck mechanic, play the RPG first, figure out how it functions, and then start investing in luck. Luck stats are a little bit janky sometimes.
Oh, dude, in Fallout 4, luck was overpowered.
It was so
you got
good. Yeah,
so much good gear early. Oh, it was the best.
Just a ton of ammo. Roguelites or roguelikes. You've probably heard the term, and you see it, and you go, yep, that's a game. The genre itself, it feels a little weird, and so the way that I've heard it explained before, and what I commonly subscribe to as its explanation, is that roguelites or roguelikes is a system where you play through the process of a game with the intention of playing it again. And essentially what that could be going through a number of small little areas until you beat a boss, and then you get some new mechanic that you unlock, so you can do it again over with a new mechanic. And as we explain the games that we have listed, it might make a little more sense, but the core concept of roguelites is they're incredibly replayable, because runs only last the entire game, quote unquote, is only 20 minutes to an hour typically. So you can play through everything that the game kind of has to offer in terms of either story or layout, I guess might be a way to put it. But there's so many different ways that you can play that story. That's what keeps coming back. I hope I explained that well enough. If I didn't, make sure you let me know. Anyway, the first game that I have as kind of a good starter game for roguelites, and a game that I've been playing a lot recently, is Hades. I really like this game. A few reasons why. It's got a really, really compelling story. If you like Greek mythology, definitely check out Hades. Play as the son of Hades, and your whole objective is to get to the surface. You can do so with like 6 different weapons, and the different Olympian gods will give you different power-ups depending on what god you talk to in order to help your way along. So in terms of roguelites, one of the main things I love is build diversity. I don't like
Yeah.
playing the same game over and over and over. So each run is going to be a different experience because of the different power-ups or the different weapons that I'm using. It's very visually appealing. It is
The
kind
music
of
is also fantastic.
Music is fantastic. It is fast-paced, but if you want a good story, there's a god mode, so you can just kind of turn on a mode where you just kind of do a lot of damage, don't take much back, to kind of just get through the story if that's something that interests you. But it's definitely worth checking out. And then the second game I have in terms of roguelites is Slay the Spire. What is it? It's a deck building game. So you get,
it's a deck building roguelite.
It's a deck building roguelite. So you essentially get 3 different characters to choose from, and they have different cards that you can use to then kind of progress your way through each level as you battle different creatures and whatnot. The game will definitely explain it much better than I will ever, but essentially after every time you beat an encounter, you get to add a new card to your deck, and there are so many different interlocking mechanics with the cards that it allows you to really just kind of go off and figure out like real different powerful ways to kind of approach every encounter, which I think is really cool. There isn't much of a storyline. It's kind of like a loose storyline that just makes everything sort of fit, nothing really engaging. And if you don't have the patience for something like deck building, what makes a good and bad deck, and if that's not something you want to figure out, it might not be your cup of tea, is kind of I think where it goes from there. Anyway,
yeah, and I think
those are the two.
Those are the pretty traditional
Yep.
roguelites. I kind of went a little different.
Sure.
When I thought of roguelites, I thought of a little bit more of the dungeon crawly aspect of a roguelite.
Yep.
And the first game that popped to my mind, and it's my first game, is Hollow Knight. It's a roguelite insofar as you're meant to die a lot.
Yeah.
You're gonna die a ton.
Yep.
But you use that to keep progressing forward, and the universe, or like the map, is huge.
Yes.
You can explore in any direction you want. There's no hindrance, and you find like checkpoints along the way, and you pick up items. And so where it becomes a roguelite is like how you traverse through the arena or the area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But why I picked Hollow Knight first is because mechanically it's really easy. There's
Makes
not
sense.
a ton to it. There's a jump, there's a dash, there's a hit.
Yep.
It's about it.
Yep.
And you get like cool magic abilities eventually, and then you can kind of make your build on that as you progress through the game. But you are meant to die a little bit more, and that was something that I always thought about in roguelites. Is like, well, Ryan said you're supposed to play the game a lot. Yes, but you're also gonna die a lot doing it. So that's kind of what
That's true.
I focused on. So like in the same vein, like I also had like Asterisk could play like Metroid. Metroid's like a more linear roguelite in that aspect. And then the second game I have, which is much more traditional, and I have way too many hours in this game, is The Binding of Isaac.
Yep. Saw that one coming, and I almost put it down, but no, I figured you'd be way better.
I mean, I could have gone with Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, but I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Binding of Isaac is the more traditional roguelite where you start as like a base character and then you just progress through a dungeon. Like you go down, literally you start in a basement, you go down all the way to like hell, or you can go all the way up into heaven. Again, that's as the game progresses, but as you go along the way, you get an item room, you can pick up items. It's got a small RPG element insofar as you have to pick up like keys and chests, and every floor has an item where you get an item, or an item room where you get an item to add to your build. Every time you beat a boss, you can get another item again to add to your build. There's where the Binding of Isaac gets overwhelming is there are hundreds of items.
So many items.
I think there's about 600 items, and there's a bunch of hidden mechanics, like the secret room, the secret room, the ultra secret room, how to unlock the devil deal, what to do with the sacrifice pit. And the game doesn't explain anything.
And it explains zero things to you.
It explains zero things.
It drops you in and says, this is how you move, this is how you shoot. Good luck.
But where the game becomes amazing is I have around 800 hours in the game, and I am constantly getting new builds.
Yep.
There are constantly new synergies I'm finding between items that makes it so replayable. On top of, there are now 34 characters in the game. There are 17 base characters, and there's 17 B-side characters.
I think I've unlocked 8 of them.
And each of those characters have their own mechanic to make themselves broken easier. So like, you can start as Isaac, who has the D6 that lets you re-roll items until you find one you like, basically. Or you could play as the Lost, who gets flying but dies in one shot. But you get flying and spectral tears and like all this stuff, and there's just different, each character is different, and it's so replayable. Hollow Knight is replayable for a few times. Like, you get 3 or 4 times, and it's interesting each time. The story is also gorgeous, but like a game that like I could literally, like, there are just times I won't play for like 3 months, and then out of nowhere I'll drop like 200 hours into the game just because why not?
And I think what actually Binding of Isaac does better than any roguelite that I've ever played, and I've played a lot. One of the coolest things about roguelites is, you know, sometimes there'll be super rare items or super rare pickups that drastically change how the game functions, and they feel very rewarding to pick up and use, and you're like, yes, but they're rare, you don't see much. Binding of Isaac has the best rare items that drastically change your playstyle, that drastically change how the game functions. Most rewarding. Hands down.
And you'll see, like, you'll eventually get used to seeing these items, and you'll see one and you'll be like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, it'll
like,
be
this is
amazing.
Exactly what I wanted.
I'm gonna go change my pants real quick and I'll be right back.
Yeah. Right. Like I like the number of times you'll see like quad shot or polyphemus, brimstone. Oh god, yes. And just like run saving. And like the ways to break the game. Like, the game is designed to be broken, and you can like break the game and just have like unkillable runs where you just like walk in a room and everything explodes effectively. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot to it, but the reason I have it as a second game is to get to that spot is very challenging, and it takes a lot of work.
It takes a lot of memorization of a lot of items.
Yep. And the mechanics, the hidden mechanics,
which you'll learn, right, just as you play it. But yeah, it could be pretty daunting for sure.
But because you don't know the items, you'll step into a room and it'll be like, "Are you a wizard?"
No.
And you'll pick it up, and then your run's just
or a dunce cap.
Yeah, that's what are you?
Oh, is that one?
That's the item version of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll just pick it up and your run's just like over. You're like, all right. Well, or you'll pick up like Ipecac and just die. Anyway, those are the roguelike games that we recommend if you're getting into the game, or if you've played roguelites and wanna take it up a notch. The next category we have is action adventure. I'll go first. Well, I guess we'll just snake it. My first one is Banjo-Kazooie for action adventure.
Okay.
It's just like Banjo-Kazooie.
It's just Banjo-Kazooie.
It's just Banjo-Kazooie. It's a platformer. You run around as, I think he's a dog, or is he a bear, with a bird on your back. It's you get new mechanics throughout the game. It's super kid friendly, and it just kind of gets you into this idea of like, there isn't much to the game, but what is interesting about the game is the world around you. You know, kind of the story, the characters are interesting. There's no level up mechanic, but you like use different tools to kind of progress through the game. So like, what makes one spot difficult will be made easier by an item you get later in the game. And then you can come back to that one spot and go, okay, now I can traverse this easier and maybe get an item that you didn't have before. But it's kind of like, when I think of adventure games, like Banjo-Kazooie is the first thing that comes to my brain, because like there are also like different branches you can take, and you can go to different parts of the world, and it's just fun. It's really easy to pick up. There's no like crazy mechanics or anything wild to like have to like master or memorize. It's just fun platforming, interesting, like, and like, I don't know, I've always liked it. I loved it as a kid. Banjo-Kazooie growing up, Banjo-Tooie was almost as fun as Banjo-Kazooie. But yeah, and then the second one that I have, again, this is where the world gets bigger. There are more mechanics. There's a leveling up system. I have the Batman Arkham series. Just pick one, whether it's Arkham Asylum, Knight, or City. Just pick one. The world is huge. The story's fantastic. You get to play as Batman and beat people up. Like, there's what's not to love. The reason I have this is like a tier up is, again, it's more of the platforming, it's more exploration focus, which is where I kind of leaned into the adventure aspects of these games. But there is a combat system that you do need to learn. It's not super complicated. Just hit X a bunch. If you're on an Xbox controller or Square, just hit X a bunch, you'll be fine. And the story is just super cool as you just play through it. I've played the game a bunch.
If you're a fan of Batman, play these games.
I'm a fan of Batman, yeah, like, you know,
you're doing yourself a disservice by not playing these games.
Yeah, and I don't really think there's much to say in that, except there is a level up system. It's very minor. It's not going to make or break your game, but it's just fun to just kind of explore a world as these characters. And I think that's the big draw for me for action adventure is the world needs to be interesting. The characters need to be interesting. And for me, Batman's always interesting, and Banjo-Kazooie is just so fun and playful. It's impossible for me not to enjoy.
So I definitely agree. I don't have much experience with Banjo-Kazooie, but from what you say, it sounds like
it's so fun. It is so cute. Like it's like those old N64 games were like voice acting wasn't really a thing,
Yeah,
and
so
so they just like Kazooie
weird
just
mumbling.
warbles. It's just weird mumbling, and it's just like it's just really adorable and fun, and like you play as a bear who's like looking for his sister who was taken by an evil witch. Like that's the whole game, and it's just fun.
My action adventure games. So the first one, and this is actually through more. This recommendation actually comes more vicariously through other people's that I've talked to, and Zelda Breath of the Wild. I've played Zelda Breath of the Wild. I'm playing it right now. I haven't played it. I haven't beaten it yet, but more than any other game that I know of that I've talked to somebody about who I didn't assume had anything to do with gaming, they had nothing but good things to say about Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. I actually was gonna put Twilight Princess.
Yep.
But the reason I did is because all my other games are fairly dark, so I was like, let's put a fun one in there. But yeah,
sense.
Zelda games are impossible to go wrong with.
So Zelda Breath of the Wild, the mechanics, the way they have the mechanics set up are incredibly simple. But what the game doesn't tell you is you can do anything with those mechanics they give you. So like, yeah, you can use them for their surface level abilities, but all of a sudden you're figuring out how to do X, Y, and Z with them, and now you're somewhere you definitely shouldn't be, but you got there anyway. It's by far probably one of the best open world games in terms of it doesn't quote unquote level gate anything. That
you can literally fight the final boss right off the rip if you want.
Exactly. Good luck, but it is possible. That's why I think it's just a good broad open. Not to mention that like it's just really visually appealing. Great game. The second game I've had was Dying Light. If you are a zombie fan, do yourself a favor and play Dying Light.
If you're a zombie fan that wants to drop kick zombies specifically, pick up Dying. You just sold the game. Like another 2 million units. I say Dying Light, it does have light RPG leveling mechanics, but really that's not the focus of the game. They just kind of help improve your experience. The jump kicks the entire purpose of
the entire purpose of the game. It's got like a B-level story. Right, like it's got a story that you like nothing to write home about, but like what zombie movie have you seen where you went, wow, now that's a storyline? Zombieland, maybe. I mean, like at its core, you kill zombies, and it gives you a lot of tools to do so. It's a lot of crafting of like melee weapons, and it feels very satisfying to hit these zombies with melee weapons.
With a baseball bat that you just electrify.
Right, exactly. Or you got a hammer and added a bunch of nails at the end of it to give it bleed damage.
And it's on fire.
It's just a sandbox kill zombies game. Definitely worth a playthrough.
It's got parkour elements to it. So to make because you drop into a giant city, and it's got parkour elements to get to the tops of these buildings, and like so you can see the landscape and get from point A to point B.
The movement that the game has makes it very enjoyable to transverse from point A to point B.
Traverse. There's no end in that.
Did I say transverse?
It's
the transverse. Yeah, it's a transverse property of movement. Anyway, it makes it very enjoyable to get point A to point B, which can sometimes be a slog in adventure games or RPGs. Like sometimes you're like, oh my god, I gotta go across the map. This game makes it an enjoyable experience to do so. So something I definitely recommend. Dying Light. The next category we got is turn-based games. I thought about it. I put some real hard thinking, and I was like, should I pick Pokemon? And the answer is no. Why? Because everybody and their mother knows what Pokemon is, and you already know whether or not it's for you. If you want to find a turn-based game with similar, this is super effective, quote-unquote, against that, or advantage mechanics, with a little bit more of a tactical aspect to it, I recommend Fire Emblem. For 2 reasons. One, it gives you that tactical aspect. You get a really cool, diverse character pool. Within that, I guess there's more than 2 reasons coming up, but not a big deal. We don't count here. It's also the most important part. Waifu simulator.
It's a waifu simulator.
So if you ever
also nepotism simulator.
Nepotism simulator. If you ever wanted to ask yourself, if you ever asked yourself the question, wow, I really wish I could fight a horde or just an army with one dude, and then later fall in love with big anime boobas, this is your game.
This is
on the surface, it is a turn-based tactical game, and once again, the game will do much better explaining the mechanics than I ever could. So just kind of on the surface level, that's what it is.
Yeah, you start with a party of anywhere from 6 to 50. If you play like Radiant Dawn, you get like 50 units or something ridiculous.
A lot of units.
Yeah, and you fight another. They drop you into scenarios, wherever the story needs you to be. You drop into a scenario and you have to like take out an enemy squad or save an enemy squad or whatever the objective is. you get to control each unit once, and they can move, like, depending on their class, like they can move so far, or they go like X in the turn order, and then certain classes are more effective against other classes than others. That's where the super effective mechanic comes into play. Like assassins, I believe they're weak to Pegasus Knights. It's been a minute since I know archers are super effective against Pegasus Knights.
That's true.
That's for sure.
Flying units in general, I think, are weak to archers.
There's that, and you know, like it's turn-based. So you go, then they go, and you go, and they go.
It's single-player turn-based. You don't need to worry about some sweaty dude online.
There is a multiplayer.
There is a multiplayer, but do the storyline.
It's very sweaty.
Yeah, and also like, I got way too invested into like the dating simulator they just like stapled on top of it. It's not like a fleshed out dating sim. It's just like sometimes you make romantic connections with your party.
Unless you play Shadow Dragon, where everybody gets a romantic connection and you get all kinds of kids.
Well, no, I played, which one was it? Not the one that came after Awakening. Not important. I played one where that happened too. All the characters could have romantic connection. And it's not like it's a fleshed out system. It just kind of happens ambiently. But you get kind of invested into it. So it's really odd in that sense. So my second turn-based game, to be fair, this game probably fits better under RPG, but I wanted to include this somewhere, is Divinity 2.
You know, I kind of hate you. I was really hoping you wouldn't take both of my games, but
I took both of them?
Both. Those are mine. Was Radiant Dawn and then Divinity. Yep.
Okay, so I guess this will be just Glad we're on the same page here.
Yeah, it's like we were roommates.
Yeah, Divinity 2. Once again, it really is more of an RPG with character creation and class customization.
Think if you've ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons, it's the closest thing to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
On a computer game.
Agreed, 100%. It's when it comes to the combat itself, it is turn-based. You go, I go, you go, I go, and they do a really good job of making the skills that your characters use feel satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, they really do. You kind of lean into like one tree or another. But again, it's kind of the Borderlands thing where you pick a class and you can go any route within the class that you want.
Yep.
However, the class has strengths, and so your first time around, at least, you're gonna play into those strengths and go, okay, this is like what, if I want to be a Shadow Blade, this is what I'm gonna build. But you can, if you wanted to, you can go with other books and other stuff like that. But typically your first playthrough, you just kind of lean into the strengths of the class. And the story's pretty cool. It's got those RPG elements of side quests and
decisions matter.
Decisions matter, dialogue options.
Yep.
You can literally kill anyone in the game. I think I was playing a run with Daryl, and on Divinity Original Sin 2, you drop into an island. It's a prison island, and we literally executed everybody on the island because we could. Like, you can do anything in the game, but at the end of the day, it is turn-based.
Yeah, right.
You have a certain set of abilities.
I like how we both kind of like loosely thought about like, okay, there's a turn-based element. We're just gonna like ham-fist it into the turn-based category.
Well, because it's a good way of being an action adventure game because it is so expansive. There's so much to explore and take in the game.
Right.
It is an RPG. Pretty much everything. It's everything but a shooter. Like there's so much replayability in the game. But if we want to do another one, if you've done turn-based, where XCOM is also one that's like a step above. It's got a cover system just like Gears. It's like a tactical shooter. One thing Fire Emblem and XCOM both share, if you play Fire Emblem on a harder difficulty, if your unit dies, it dies permanently, so you can actually kill off characters in the game. XCOM's the same way, although the characters are designed to die. It's frustrating, but you're not as attached to them. But it's, again, tactical. They have abilities. You move on a tile system. You get like accuracy boosts if you're behind cover. You get damage boosts in certain areas. So that's another turn-based that I could think of off the top of my head after Ryan hijacked both of mine.
Anyway, next one up is fighting games.
So fighting games is the one I have the least amount of experience with. So I went very, very shallow with this. And these are basically kind of the same game, but there's one kind of key difference. My first intro fighting game is Mortal Kombat.
Oh, okay.
Strictly because there is a really large campaign.
Okay.
So you don't need to go online to figure out how to play the game. Yeah, you're forced to play every character at some point in the campaign. There are difficulty level. There's difficulties, and then you can go fight like in the old Mortal Kombat they were called towers. I don't know if they're still called towers anymore. but then you can go like fight the computer like up like a gauntlet, effectively gauntlet style, so you can kind of learn a character that way. I didn't want to choose a brawler like Smash, just because I think by and large, if you're gonna get into like fighting games traditionally, it's gonna be that kind of like side 2D.
Yep.
There's gonna be more of those, so I wanted to pick games that are closer to that. So
Sure.
Mortal Kombat, because of the campaign, is my first, and then the second one is just Street Fighter. It's just
Okay.
Mortal Kombat with less of a campaign.
Yeah, and everybody knows it.
And everybody knows Street Fighter. You can probably find somebody that will play Street Fighter with you and kind of teach you the game. Also, the mechanics are really smooth. It's a really responsive game, as opposed to, I know there are certain other fighting games that like feel just a little bit clunky when you're moving from left to right, and it's not so like the transitions aren't so smooth. So those are my two. Again, I don't have a ton of experience. I know of many fighting games, but I could never delineate among them all outside of cast of characters. I think that's the reason I like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter is like the cast of characters is also huge, so you're gonna find one that you like.
Makes sense. And
For you,
kind
yeah.
of in a similar vein, I don't have too much experience with fighting games. And I know Kevin said he wanted to stick away from the Super Smash aspect of things, but that's where I'm definitely just headed, is Super Smash Brothers, mainly because everybody's probably played it at one point in their time in life, right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't yet, it is like you get to play your favorite Nintendo character, and just kind of like this, not sandbox brawler, but it's just a brawler, which is kind of just means you don't need to know any crazy combos.
The draw to a brawler is the entire game is based around the button A.
Right.
Almost all of the combat is used through the A button.
Right.
And it's just different directions, whether you do A right, left, up, or down.
So the
And then
combos
you also, the combos are easier. You don't have to do like half circle, like heavy melee or like heavy punch, like, you know, up, crescent, like light kick. Like you don't have to like do massive inputs to get off like one sequence of attacks. It's just kind of like a few inputs.
It's just an easy game to pick up, and it has a fair amount of depth, right? So if you get to the point where you're like,
Easy to learn, hard to master.
exactly,
For sure.
you're like, I really want to learn more about this, then yeah, there is a whole lot you can do with it, because the attacks do sometimes lead into each other. It's just on you to figure that out. My second fighting game is that more classical 2D side-scrolling fighting game is Dragon Ball FighterZ. And that's actually the similar vein of Super Smash. So what they did, I think it's Capcom, what they did is they took the idea of a side fighter like Mortal Kombat, like Street Fighter, Tekken, whatever you want to insert fighter here, but they made it more accessible to a newer audience. So in the similar vein, something that you just want to pick up, you want to go, but you want to have that depth. There are combos available. You can have those inputs to really do those big flashy moves.
I've heard really good things about the
It's
game too. by the way.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It definitely falls under the category easy to learn, hard to master it, because you could get by, like if you and your friends are playing, you can get by pressing like one or two buttons, and it feels satisfying. That was always my issue with like Mortal Kombat, is like I tried to play it and nothing felt satisfying to do because I didn't know the combos. So definitely something I recommend trying out.
Yeah, and the reason and like there are other brawlers out there. They're few and far between,
Right.
not named Smash. Yeah, and Ryan picked good games that are like mechanically easier to play. Mortal Kombat's probably harder to play mechanically, but because they kind of like really easy into the game and go, here, look, there's the campaign, play the campaign, you'll figure it out. They even tell you like certain combos. They tell you how to do a fatality or brutality. They tell you how to do everything. And Street Fighter does that a little bit less, but they give you like, you know, they give you a sheet and it's like, well, now you got to memorize the sheet per character. The games that Ryan mentioned, it seems like you don't really need to do that as much. Everybody has like the exact same move inputs. You know, for Smash, it's literally just pick a cardinal direction and hit A or B.
Right.
And then, you know, a certain move comes out. So it's a lot easier to,
There's a little bit more, it's a little bit smoother if you don't know what you're doing. It's really
and
what it
again,
boils down to.
yeah, and for the neckbeards and internet trolls out there, they're telling us that we watered down these games. Of course we did. These are interests. We're both very aware of how mechanically difficult fighting games specifically are to play, and that's why I don't play them, because I don't have the finger dexterity to do so.
I don't
Unless
have
it's
the
Smash.
patience.
Yeah,
When it
to
comes
learn
down
to
to
sit
it,
down and learn a character.
You sit down and learn a character, and I just get too frustrated too easily. So if you're like, you know what, I have that patience, or I like that in-depth complexity, definitely look at fighting games. Okay, and then our super secret topic coming at us.
Yeah, super secret. So we've gone through the major categories in games.
Yes.
And we would be remiss not to add this final category into the major categories of games, and that's intro Lego game.
Yep.
There are
Absolutely.
just so many Lego games out there. Where to start your Lego gaming journey? I'm gonna let Ryan go first so I don't steal his.
Yeah, well, I hope I don't steal yours. I chose Lego Star Wars.
Ooh, that's a solid. Yeah, it's a solid choice.
Lego Star Wars
characters in that game was great.
I actually played all of them because why wouldn't you play all of them?
Yeah. Because they're just so funny.
If you can find it, which it shouldn't be too hard, there's like
I think they're on Steam.
Yeah, there's like a remastered version or something like that. There's a version where you get all 6 episodes. I guess there's more than 6 episodes now. So thanks everybody.
We don't talk about those.
We don't talk about those. You get all 6 episodes, and you go through it as if you were that. So like you'll play as Luke or you'll play as Anakin or whoever for whatever that is applicable to. And then once you beat that level, you get to play it over again with whatever character you want. You can play it as R2-D2. You played as C-3PO. Everybody's got similar, like most of the Jedis have similar mechanics. Droids have similar mechanics. But you can just play with any cast of characters from the Star Wars universe, which is really cool. And they do a really good job of interpreting the Star Wars storyline with zero dialogue.
With no dialogue,
Zero
and so I don't know how they make facial animations of a Lego character just so telling, but they do. They're so descriptive, and it's great.
If you have a kid that you're trying to get into video games, Lego Star Wars.
And that was my second choice. I picked 2, so there's no way you could take both of them.
I was really worried that I was gonna take it.
Nope, because mine is Lego Batman.
Okay, I've actually never
Lego Batman's a ton of fun. Again, the best part about Lego Batman is you get to play as the villains too. Oh, you get to play as both.
That's awesome.
And part of the reason Lego Batman is so much fun is and it's what makes Lego games so much fun is you get to just play as everybody, and they do a great job of interpreting Batman into like this kid-friendly. I mean, Batman is kid-friendly, but it gets really dark. But they make it so lighthearted and funny. That's my big draw to Lego Batman. It's a funny game to play. Also, the Lego Batman movie is fantastic. It's so good.
It's such a good movie.
It's such a good movie. So it gets an accompanying movie. There's nothing to dislike about it. Yeah, everything about the game is just a ton of money to drive around the Batmobile and all that good stuff. It's the Arkham series, but in Lego form and fun. So there's. If I put Arkham on here, I had to put Lego Batman.
That makes sense. Yeah. I'm glad
of course.
Or not.
Yeah, that's gonna close it up, I think, for our game.
This is by no means a comprehensive list. So if anybody in the comments is telling us, but you didn't mention this game.
Or this category, we didn't do driving games. Go
play Forza. Actually, don't go play Forza because that's terrible. That game is incredibly difficult.
We'll have to do one just for racing games.
I think I've played a total of like 6 racing games, and they're all Need for Speeds. So that's what I got.
This is in no way a comprehensive, exhaustive list. If you have a game that you like a lot and you think, hey, this is a good game that I would love to introduce people, put in the comments. Let us know. We would love to hear what you guys think.
Yep.
If we left off a category, we apologize. You can say, oh my god, how could you, and then tell us what category we forgot, and then we'll use it for a later video. So thanks for the
suggestions. Free content. It's
free content. So let us know. But let us know what you guys think down in the comments below. We do want to hear. And if you've made it this far, please subscribe. Or don't. That's your prerogative.
Time is just a construct.
Yeah, right.
If quarantine has taught me one thing, is time doesn't exist.
It's still March 2020 for me, so right. We're just in the 14th month of March.
Yeah. Okay.